How's it going, everybody? Another weekly giveaway here. Super stoked for some more Baldur's Gate. So, first up, we're just going to go ahead and get this on the road. So, the YouTube winner this week is Louis Idlet. So, I'm going to go ahead and open this first pack here. Let's do this. Yet again, more great cards from Baldur's Gate. Excellent. So there we go. There's a cool one of the background commanders. Count Recon. Fireball. Poison the Blade. Deadly Dispute. Hey, that's a good card. Used to be like $5. Avenging Hunter. Pack Attack. And creatures get +X/+O. Band Together. Split the Spoils. Great card, by the way, if you haven't played it yet. It's really good. Hey, there's a Bag of Holding. Stone Speaker Crystal, another great card. Minthara, Merciless Soul. If you've seen this commander go off, it's actually quite good. Tavern Brawler. A Alora Merry Thief in foil etched. Love that. There's a Minsk and Boo, Timeless Heroes. Ellen Heartbreeze in the foil sketch version. And a old school list Pyroclasm. Gotta love that. All right. So that is pack number 1. Let's go ahead and open pack 2. And this one is going to be for the Twitter winner, which is Strat Pap. All right. The art card we've got here, there's a dragon. It's pretty sweet. I think this is the Ancient Brass Dragon, so that's the black one. There's an island. A charcoal diamond. Kadira, Caller of the Small. Dread Linorm, which is one of the adventure creatures. A Basilisk Gate. The Great Sword of Tyr, aka the common version of Seraphic Greatsword. Stunning Strike. Criminal Past. Ambition's Cost. Great card draw if you're doing like a artisan format or something like that. Sivris. I actually really love Sivris. Corlessa, which is fun. Kind of like 50% card draw there. Dungeon Delver. There is a foil etched Miracle. That's pretty cool. The Horn of Valhalla, which has that Isgard's Call on it. And a foil Sea Hag with a initiative and undersea token. So, yeah, we'll announce those winners, get those cards out to you. It's pretty sweet. So that is our giveaway for this week. For those of you looking to hang around, give me 1 second. I'm going to readjust the camera here. All right. Good times, and get you in a little closer here. And answer. There we go. Cool. So, yeah, I had a couple of things that I wanted to just kind of talk about this week. So, getting some feedback that what people would really like the channel to focus on is like theory episodes and stuff like that. So I'm probably going to start doing more co-op type stuff that way. yeah, I think that that will be super fun. A bunch of my friends who've been playing the game for a long time are really interested in doing that. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to it. The episodes that we've recorded already, so we've done one for Control already, and I have yet to finish the audio editing on that, but we'll get that out there pretty quick here. We also have one for each of the other different archetypes. You know, your aggro, your mid range, your combo. There will be other stuff like politics, gaining advantage using politics, because I did a episode on gain the advantage, which is going to be what is released later today, and that will give you kind of just the basics of what the mechanics within the game can do to give you advantage, and then we'll address political ways to do that outside of just what's on cards, because I think that that's a pretty big portion of what happens in Commander, especially in casual play, is politicking and making sure that you have the ability to gain those advantages. In addition, um, we were also thinking about doing different gameplay rules and going through a full series, really, which I'm calling the CQ Cup for right now, where certain players will come in and will assign points for wins and like first blood, those kind of things that people do, um, just to make the game a little bit more interesting. And I'm also going to start working on a video in the near future how to make, for those of you who like streaming games, I think that one of the weaknesses is that A, people don't hype up the cards that they're playing enough, and B, you don't play cards that have a gambling element to them. Kind of, I was talking to one of my friends the other day about this. Basically, when you're talking about Itali is a good example, right? When you swing with Itali, everybody sucks wind because you have no idea what you're going to hit off of something like that. And as a result of that, you end up generating a little bit more interest in that particular, we'll call it a scene, right? Because you can build your deck to where there are certain scenes that it can pose as the climax of the game, right? Um, you can play the Great Aurora, you can play a Genesis Wave, you can, hey, here's this big old creature. In general, what we're trying to do is create that suspense type moment within the game, and that would mean that we we have to think about that in deck building when we're including cards in our deck. I think that around 10 cards that like, this is a really climactic card. Even just Gamble, where it's a one cost red sorcery. You search your library for a card, put it in your hand, and then you discard a card at random. Even that has an element of suspense to it because you don't know if you're going to get that card for sure. And you can kind of play that up to the people who are watching the show. So I've been really thinking about that a lot. So we'll try and create in our deck building, as well as obviously um, becoming more competent game streamers, as it were. Spent the last week or so learning how to do Twitch streaming. So that will probably be happening in the near-ish future. Have to get people that are willing to play that with us. In other news, let's see. I'm doing quick takes now. If you've seen those come across, which are basically just like a quick 2-ish minute video of, hey, this is something that I found interesting that in creating other episodes, or this is a central mechanic. I'm probably going to start doing strategy quick takes because people seem to really want strategic advice for the game, and I am happy to give that. That is, if you've ever taken the, what is that called? It's the Strengths Finder or whatever. Strategic is literally my number one. So if you want strategy advice, I'm the guy you come to, and I am so happy to educate and help people and share what I can, what I know with them. Yeah, I think that that's about it as far as updates. I'm gonna do an Ask Me Anything situation here, which if you ever saw that whole situation, um, I don't often. Uh, I'm not really good with social media. I've up until the recent past basically been doing. Uh, I've had Facebook Messenger because Android didn't have a good messaging app. So I'm learning all these things as we go through, right? I'm learning how to do Twitch. Uh, I'm learning how to do the YouTube situation, actually creating content on YouTube. And then on top of that, how's it going? Absolute dog. Good to see you here. Yeah, I did already crack the packs, but that'll be on recording later. The winners for this week, for anybody who wasn't here at that time, Loose Idlet won for the YouTube, and Strat Pap won for Twitter. So we did already crack those packs, and that is the first thing that I'll be doing on streams every week. So first thing there. Anything else cool? Yeah, I'm just learning all these different new things. OBS Studio for Twitch is really kind of cool. Uh, got that all figured out. So yeah, we'll be streaming live games. We'll be doing live content in the near future for strategy advice because that seems to be what everybody's looking for. And we're going to pitch that specifically to if you've watched the tier video yet. The tier 3 and 4 seems to be like the primary tier 2 and 3. So the pre-competitive and the casual constructed kind of crowd is what we're pitching all of those live videos to. If you are interested, I'm going to start. I'm just going to kind of go into game design in general, like my journey, if you will, through game design and why that's so important to me and to the content that you're actually enjoying, watching, whatever. Whether you enjoy it or not, it's still here, and I'm enjoying making it. So I hope that you also are enjoying it. As far as game design is concerned, I started off watching. This is kind of funny. Parks and Rec is a great show. If you've ever watched that cool sitcom, kind of like the interview style humor. And Ben, one of the characters on that show, made a super convoluted game called Cones of Dunshire. And I was like, you know what? I can make a game. So I spent a very sleepless night trying to figure out, okay, what's a game that people would really enjoy. So I did this thing called, which I would kind of equate to like D&D for beginners. It's called Heroes Skyne, which probably will go through a name change at some point. My names have just stuck. We've been addressing them that way for so long. It's kind of crazy. The objective, the first iteration of the game Hero Skyne was, hey, here's a 10 by 10 grid. We're going to put, 100 small pieces of paper on this. You're each going to go through as the classic party, rogue, cleric, warrior, wizard. And you're going to try and find these 4 bosses and defeat them. And that's when the game is over. And we never finished one of those games because there were 96 tiles to explore. And if you can only move up to 3 times in a given turn, and that's not even like attacking anything, it just took so long to do that. It was such a failure on my part. So what we did was we took it down to an 8 by 8, and that's actually about 33% of the board scaled down. So that really helped out. And since then, it's actually gone to, here is a pile of tiles. I actually have them here. Give me 1 second. So it is actually a pile of tiles that look something like this. So you have your goblins, you have them with attack, defense, how much on the top corner. So attack, defense, how many hit points they have, which I have markers for all that. And then you also have how much gold you get in addition to how many, we call them loot dice. So everything's a d6 in this game. And yeah, that was super fun, cool. it's gone through a lot of iterations. Here is an example of a loot dice, if you can see that. So that's a potion that you can get to like heal hit points. Here's gold. This is you draw a card from the deck, and then you've got like you get to increase like an action or a skill basically. Um, and then this one, oh no, you get an additional action. That was that one. That's what the arrow is for. And then you have the. I haven't opened this box in almost a year, so forgive me for not completely remembering everything. And this is a add a skill point. So kind of the static like plus ones that you get. So like here's your +2 sword of orcish rage or whatever like that, right? And then you have like your character cards. So these are a late game iteration of all of this that my friends have really helped me out with doing all the playtesting and stuff like that. I think there's still one more iteration this is going to go through before I finalize the format. But yeah, I wanted to share that. Making mistakes is the best way to learn, I think. And I've made almost $3,000 worth of mistakes on this game. So that's where I'm coming from is like I have legitimately monetarily paid for the lessons that I have learned along the way. And that was like scrimping and saving, working a job at Home Depot and at Miller Paint for the longest time. So I was a retail employee setting aside what little I could to get each of these prototypes. And yeah, I really had to buckle down and be like, oh, I can't just like order stuff. I need to like know what I'm doing. And that's been a really helpful thing when it comes to playing Magic, right? Because when it comes to playing Magic, you're spending money on cards. One way or the other, you're going to be spending money on cards. And those cards need to do something for you. So if you spend money on those cards and you're like, well, this isn't actually what I wanted, you've actually wasted quite a bit of money along the way. So part of the metric that I've talked about before is like, don't waste your money. Buy the cards that actually are good and qualify and can actually do something for you in multiple decks. Great example of this is when I was playing Modern. I played the Living End build, and this is pre-Faithless Looting ban, by the way. I played the Living End build, I played Hollow One, and I played Dredge. And all three of those, if you took them in combination, I could run basically the same Jund mana base for. So I had three different decks. I could just switch them out as I wanted to. And yeah, if you've ever played Modern, like the barrier to entry is the fact that your mana base costs like $1,000. It's ridiculous. Probably a little bit less now that they've done the Modern Horizons 2 reprints of a lot of the fetch lands that were a little bit harder to get to. And yeah, I think that managing your money when it comes to this game is just as important as anything else, right? Finding things that fit your needs as a player that don't tax you too much, right? So, a great example, I bought a Smothering Tithe back when, and I'm not a control player. And Smothering Tithe is, in my opinion, primarily either an artifact synergy card or it's a control card. And it's one of those two and probably not much of anything else. So I don't play a lot of control. And as a result, you find yourself not actually like having a lot of options with that card. So it stayed in a hard sleeve for a lot of the time. So managing your money, buying the things that you need for the archetypes that you actually like is really important. I have one of my friends that exclusively plays within the Naya shard. So he is focusing in on buying all of that specific mana base is for the red, green, white Naya shard, right? And I think that's pretty true with everybody. I don't play a lot of blue in particular. I play a lot of Grixis. I won't play a lot of Esper. Play a good amount of Jund. just have a lot of decks, honestly. That I shouldn't say that. I have like 7 decks, but they go through a lot of iterations, right? I think all of us have that moment of just, well, I'm sick of this. I'm gonna rotate it out for something else and play something completely different. And some decks stick. I think that over time I've gotten a few. Luris combo is one that I really enjoy. I play like the Land and Relic Order Animate Deadline in that one. So basically, as long as you have a Cutthroat effect out, it will just infinitely damage the table. I really like that build because Luris offers recursion for the pieces. So if you get countered, you can just bring stuff back. That's kind of cool. 10 is your Quandrix is kind of an iteration of one of my first decks, which was a Beastmaster Ascension based deck where you play like your, Memnite, Ornithopter, Elvish Visionary, Llanowar Elves, swing with 7 creatures. I have 7 counters on Beastmaster's Ascension now, so they all have +5/+5. I win. And yeah, that was a super fun deck, and that actually kind of comes back out in that deck for me, is just like bringing me back to the origins of how I started playing Magic, and I really love it for that. The third deck that's really stuck for me is a theme deck, and I made Essica, which is actually Prismatic Bridge. If any of you have played Essica, it's not really Essica, it's just Prismatic Bridge. Essica Godzilla monsters is super fun. So that one I bought all the foil like Ghidorah and Godzilla cards, and I was super stoked about it. And man, some of those decks just really stick with you. You know, I don't know if any of you have that experience where you have decks that have just really stuck. Any examples in the chat? If you have those, I'd be willing to talk about those. That'd be super cool. Yeah, managing money well in as far as like the game design situation. Also, I had to pay an artist for a lot of this stuff. Like I do all of the basics, right? So like this is a great example. Here's the amulet, right? So the amulet itself I didn't design. Everything else on this card though, from like the icons to the borders to everything else on there, that's all me. So all of the like character art and things like that I commission. But this game was a huge learning experience, and I think that the amount of time and energy I've had to sink into it's pretty crazy. But it was just the start. Here's the good one. This is the one that we are almost done with. That is the most recent. This is Galactic Marauders, and this is probably my favorite game. I want to show you the starting point so you can see how far this has actually come along the way. So this is one of the first cards, right? It's mostly text. It is it's basically just, hey, here are these missions you can go on across this massive map, and when you complete these missions, you earn money, right? That's pretty easy. So it's like mission fulfillment type stuff. And it went from that to this. So you can see that there's a pretty big difference between the two. I don't know if this is backwards for everybody. Can someone in the chat tell me if this is backwards? It looks like that to me. Yeah, so this is a pretty significant difference, right? You're looking at the back of the card, and that is the original versus the new. Trying to get the neon to show up. There we go. Okay, yeah, so you can kind of see that a little bit better. And then this one versus this. So that is a pretty significant difference in what you're looking at, right? The streamlining is really important. Finding things that are easier to teach is really important. That's actually how I got into doing all this Commander, was because I enjoyed the teaching process, right? And everything from this to, this is the new one, this is the old one. It was just like little flimsy currency cards. They were really hard to actually hold on to and count. Is chipboard, and And this is all stuff, obviously, that I've ordered. If you're looking for a great place for proxies, by the way, boardgamesmaker.com. It's actually quite good. It sounds like it'd be super gimmicky, but I'm pretty sure. I just ordered 150 standard smooth cards from them for $35. So if you just want like good proxies, that is the place to get them for sure. They have proven themselves to me as far as quality is concerned. Um, and here is a Mod Podged cardboard piece. So yet again, another kind of like fun, interesting starting point. Like I think everybody goes through that iteration where they're like, I need just like something that's going to work for right now. And then you come out instead with something like this, which is the exact same card, but it actually has a few more. Let's see if we can get that to show up. Yeah. Anyway, the neon looks a lot better in person for sure. You can see all the white outlines and stuff like that. But that's such a significant difference. You know, you learn so much along the way that it's kind of crazy. Relating game design to Magic. I think that's the important point. That's where I was trying to get to here. And game design as far as Magic is, I learned a lot from Magic, in all honesty. If you look at some of the mechanics that I've designed, some of the rule books that I've had to write, Magic is a great templating game. So it's extraordinarily technical. Like this, the super technical language with which they actually have to create cards makes it so that you have to learn almost a new language when you come into Magic. So teaching people how that language works, like learning Magic is learning linguistics, for lack of a better term, right? Because you're trying to figure out, oh, what does trample mean, right? Which when you're trying to learn a new language, you're like, well, you point at something and say, you know, like what's the word for that? Um, and so like curtain or something like that, and somebody will tell you, obviously. But in Magic, you have like reminder text or something like that. So trample, to somebody who's not familiar with the game, you're gonna be like, okay, so what in the world does that mean? They actually automatically, a lot of people, I should say, automatically intuit that trample damage should happen anyway, like without the trample mechanic. Um, which is interesting because when you start teaching somebody, it's like, oh yeah, obviously I have a 5/5 and you have a 1/1, so 4 damage goes through, right? And you have to tell them, well, no, they actually have to have this ability. That part is a little bit counterintuitive for a lot of people. So teaching them the language of Magic is really, it's so interesting to like be, okay, so this is how this specific ability works in this specific instance. I'm currently working on a series. It was probably the least demand out of the poll that I took, to teach players from start to finish how to play Magic. And one of the things that I think that everybody should learn first is how the mana pool works, right? Because if you've ever played the original game, like your first game, you play a Llanowar Elves, you tap it, and you go search your library and put it into play, right? Because obviously it says tap, add forest. No, this is the mana pool. This actually is kind of an ethereal thing that exists outside of the game. Um, and that is something that you can draw on then. It's almost like a filtering system, right? That you draw on then to cast spells afterward. And so explaining the fundamental concepts like that I think people don't focus enough on is something that I want to chime in on and create players that may be new to the game but know a lot more, or have a leg up on people who are like, I don't I didn't really understand how the stack and priority worked until about a year ago, even though I was playing modern for 5 years, something like that. I think a lot of us go through that, right? Cuz like the stack, I actually have something similar to tokens that I use for copies on the stack, right? Because if you actually stack out all of the different spells that are going through that, then you can have a good visual about what that works like. I think too many people are like, well, counter that spell. All right, this goes to the graveyard. No, no, actually put it in a stack, especially if you're playing at like pre competitive or competitive levels, because that's going to help people, especially new people to the game, visualize how the spells resolve. Um, and visuals are super important to the game. If you don't think that's true, you've bought cards for artwork. Don't lie to me. You know, um, the visuals of the game are super important. Seeing visually how everything works is very important. And then priority, right? It's like, all right, I play this spell, and then it goes around in a circle, right? To each individual player in turn order, how they want to deal with that spell, and so new players don't get that. They're especially when the veteran players don't allow the priority to pass like that. Gosh. One of our winners just chimed in here. Oh gosh. Gideon Minsk Domri. Why? Why? I'm not going to answer that question. um, yeah, so talking about priority, right? Um, Getting new players familiar with those advanced concepts as early as possible is going to give them a leg up. So if you have friends that you're trying to teach how to play, that would be something that I would kind of point you to once I get those videos completed, is specifically mana pool priority stack. If they can understand those concepts, they will have a very large up in the game on that. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of doing an open ask me anything situation right now. So if you want to ask me something that is appropriate, then I will go ahead and answer that. So, yeah, my channel is rated PG 13 ish. Um, yeah, so trying to keep it to the point where people can comfortably watch and share this with their kids if they want to. Uh, I have a kid of my own, so eventually I want her to be able to watch all of my stuff with impunity. Um, yeah. So, advanced concepts, being able to clue new players in. Gosh, I'm trying to think of something else. Yeah. Thanks for sticking around. Sometimes I just lose my train of thought here, but yeah. Questions, comments, words of encouragement. Um, if you had to play the CEDH table, what would you play? So that is a great question. I think that I would probably upgrade Lurrus to be full on CEDH from its pre-competitive nature. I do run like the Ad Nauseum. I don't have Doomsday in there yet. I would significantly upgrade the Mana Rocks in the deck to where I would be comfortable playing like a uh, turn one win if I could, right? Uh, CEDH really isn't my forte, and I think that the person asking this question knows that. But it's a good question, right? Because being able to participate in multiple metas, I'm not really great at the CEDH stuff. I love playing casual. Um, you'll find me often including pet cards in decks. Like I said, I love Itali. Um, the Godzilla version of Yadaro is one of my favorites. That's a 7 cost 8/8 with trample and haste. And while that seems like a good card to some people, others it's just stone unplayable. In our meta, the one that I regularly play in, which is primarily focused on pre-competitive, like we've had to make rules to tone ourselves down from just being straight CEDH. Um, in our meta, it's hard to run those kind of cards. I've found ways to do it. Um, there have been like proposed formats, like playing Artisan was a good one. I called it Uncommander before Artisan was a thing, but uncommons and lower basically. Thalise was one of my favorites. I play a lot of black white commanders, I guess. Um, Yeah, I think that being able to engage though in CEDH is important, and knowing the combo lines I think is really good. Empowering it down a deck, do you find decks leaning to more mid range? Um, so basically, like, does the archetypal does there become like an archetypal standard basically to that? So like, does every deck basically become mid range when you're talking about it? I think that if you are following the classical, and I'm going to call them out on this one, and that's just going to have to be okay. If you're following the classical command zone template, decks are going to look like mid range across the board. Because if everybody is building the same way, then you're going to have uniformity within the format. If you lean more toward, uh, I think that it all has to do with efficiency, right? So when it comes down to it, the thing that decreases power the most is the mana efficiency of your deck. So if you are going to run something like a standard counter spell versus, like, let's say spell swindle is a good example for like a tier 2, right? So basically like precon level, maybe not precons exactly, but precon level. um, if you're going to decrease your mana efficiency, you're going to find that you can still play every single archetype within every single tier level. I think that that's really important that people understand that. That's something that I pretty heavily advocate for. Being able to uh, play your favorite cards is really important, right? So find the tier where you fit in best. How many backup plans does a deck really want, and how many cards should it take up? That's a great question. Um, so I think that with backup plans, generally I want 2 backup plans, and those backup plans can be anywhere from 1 to 3 cards apiece. So in total, I would say dedicate generally 5 cards to a backup plan. Um, Great example. One of my buddies and I built Cranko, which generally is going to be generate a ton of goblin tokens, right? Which then you can swing with if you're going with a more aggressive build, or if you really wanted to use those tokens to generate some sort of combo, which we use stuff like Goblin Bombardment and Thornbite Staff in order to do things like that. Skirk Prospector, can generate infinite mana or something of that nature. And then you really have like some good backup plans there. Don't dedicate too many slots to backup plans, because your backup plan should always work with the rest of your deck no matter what it happens to be. If you draw the card that is your backup plan, it should still have a bearing on what you're doing, even if you don't necessarily need to use the backup plan. Um, a great example for that in that Cranko deck would be the Khans Dragons red one. Uh, the enchantment, basically, it's you can choose one, right? At the beginning of your upkeep, it exiles the top card of your library, so it's card draw or at least impulse draw. And then you have the second mode, which is whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, you can deal 1 damage to any target. I believe that's correct. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember the name of it off the top of my head. So that card works in multiple ways, right? If you are sacrificing a bunch of goblins, you can start doling out damage to your opponents, but it also functions as just card draw in the deck. So things that can serve multiple purposes within the deck are what you're looking for in backup plans. And again, you don't need to dedicate a lot of space to them, because you will eventually find them if the game goes on long enough. If you are an aggressive deck, your best backup plan is actually just card draw. And I run in Tanazir Quandrix, I run a ton of the combat oriented card draw. So your things like Reconnaissance Mission, Coastal Piracy, Bident of Thassa, like I'll run all of those, because then when I do get in with my creatures, because I will have more than most people on the board, I will be drawing enough cards to keep that game plan going. Uh, and sometimes you don't need a backup the higher up the tier scale you get, because what you're going to be doing is protecting your main strategy rather than trying to do a backup strategy. So I think that there are two lanes that you can really take there, which is protecting. So something like in Tanazir, I run like Snakeskin Veil because, oh, hey, Tanazir has Hexproof now. And, and gets a +1/+1 counter, which also fits in with the rest of the deck theme. But it also, so it runs that line, but doesn't have a backup. Like we are going like, here's a creature. It's going to buff the rest of my creatures. I'm going to swing. I'm going to kill everybody. That's it. That's the whole deck. It does it very efficiently, and it runs the most competitive cards that I can get in it. Just things that are self-replacing. Really good for aggro, by the way, if you look at that. So self-replacing creatures like cantrip creatures, Elvish Visionary, the fairy that untaps the 2 lands when it comes in. So that's basically a free spell, right? So things that just replace themselves. Would you say playing cards that affect a player's agency end up being in more powerful decks because it's expected? Do you believe this also leads to a small bleed over to a more casual table? Let's see. Effective players agency end up being more powerful decks because it's expected. Do you believe this also leads to a small bleed over to a more casual table? I'm going to answer this kind of just how I think this person is going for that. So when you're talking about removing a agency, there are options to choose, right? Giving people choices is actually, or eliminating, I guess, people's choices is really hard. Because let's talk about things like, Aven Mind Sensor is a good example. Drannith Magistrate affects agency. Yeah, so you remove, like, you're talking about lockdown effects then. So the removal of a certain capability. Is there a small bleed over? Yes. I think that when you're talking about bleeding over into casual, and this is from pre-competitive, I would say in pre-competitive, we should start destigmatizing stacks effects, because that is a level at which you kind of need those to slow down the game. One of my friends actually plays Winota pretty often, and that specific deck cheats out stacks pieces all the time, right? And when you're talking about that particular thing, like the stacks pieces, it slows down the game for everybody else, which is good, because if you want a game, one of the start, if you've seen that video yet, the rule 0 using start, the last point is turns, and it's how many turns do I want to take in a given game. I think that stacks pieces need to be destigmatized because a lot of people want to play more than 3 to 4 turns, and stacks pieces allow that to happen. And I hate admitting stuff like that. When you start bleeding over into casual, I would encourage people to run less of the lockdown effects and more of the tax effects if you are going to do that. Tax effects being the things that say you can do this, but it costs you something, right? Great example of that is like damage based stacks effects. So the one that I'm thinking of right now is just Harsh Mentor, right? It's whenever a player takes certain game actions, they just take a damage. Or Rampaging Ferocidon is whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, they take a damage. And it's like, okay, you're not removing the player's ability to do stuff, but you're saying, okay, you can do it, but you're going to have to, have something happen in return. So Leonin Arbiter, I think, is actually acceptable all the way down to a tier 3. From tier 1 to tier 3, because it says you can do this, but you have to pay an extra 2 for it. So it turns for example, a demonic tutor into a diabolic tutor, right? Which is fine. I think that that's absolutely totally okay. It punishes people running punishes people for running fetch lands, which is difficult, because especially if you're trying to, if you're trying to just smooth out your mana with your fetches rather than doing something degenerate, that's something that I don't think is really necessary. I wish that this is another kind of game design point, right? I wish that lands, or at least lands with basic land types, as we've kind of defined my group's tutor rule, I don't think that those should be regulated. I think that is Rhystic Study stacks or tax? Rhystic Study is a tax effect, 100%, because you are playing it in such a way that if players do what they're supposed to and pay it every time, the person is actually only up a few mana on the table rather than being up multiple cards on the table. So encouraging the rest of the table to play slower, um, if they're all willing to do it, you are just going to have the Rhystic Study player be deeply upset with themselves for playing Rhystic Study. Um, I did this when I was down to a 1v1 against a AEC kind of control landfall build, and I paid the one for every single spell, and other than the first one. So there was 3 mana for 1 card. And when you start doing stuff like that, Rhystic Study becomes a whole lot worse. You will kind of get that mana back over the course of the game, right? Because you're generating mana disadvantage for your opponents. But honestly, just getting that out of your mind that, hey, I want to play the game quickly, like play a longer game. Just do it. You're going to have a much better time if the person doesn't have 12 cards in their hand by the end of turn 5, right? If they play it on the 3. So yeah, I think that's acceptable. I don't like the card Rhystic Study because I think that it creates a play experience that is it creates kind of a mental load on your opponents that's not something that I want to bring into a game. So I won't do that. I'll play Smothering Tithe because I think and there's an obvious answer to that, is that you don't pay for it, right? Paying 2 mana to keep the person off of 1 is not correct in basically any scenario unless you just have that mana that you're not using, which I don't think there's a point where you're playing that card where you don't have that mana available. I kind of reversed that. Anyway, yeah. Don't pay for Smothering Tithe, pay for Rhystic Study. Having more cards is the 100% best way to win a game, for sure. I think that going back to one of the previous questions, the crossover into casual is in fact those taxation effects. And I am totally okay with those. I think that players need to embrace that as something that is okay for the format. Because that stacks is, and I'll probably get a little bit of flack for this, proactive control in a way that control generally is reactive, right? So you're saying, well, you can't do this, but it's usually like at an instant speed with a counterspell or something like that. Stacks just said, hey, I'm going to do this to the whole table, and I'm going to continue using my game plan, which generally with a stacks effect is something like blink for value or aggro or something along that line. Yeah, destigmatize stacks in your play groups, in particular the tax effects, because those are fine. Even Mind Sensor sucks, especially when you have the reason that I think it's kind of similar in effect to Opposition Agent. I am not equating the power of these 2 cards. I just want to make that perfectly clear. Opposition Agent obviously lets you actually cast stuff, which basically completely eliminates your tutors, where even Mind Sensor says at least you can search the top 4, which is not necessarily better. Anyway, yeah. Where you can, allow people their freedom, their agency to do the things they want to do, but make them pay for it. I think that that's the correct way to play stacks effects and taxation effects. So, good questions. Thank you. I think we'll take 1 or 2 more questions and then we'll end off there. if there are any. So, running back to let's need some coffee. Been talking for a little bit. Running back to just like building fun decks. I think that building around, I build around win conditions, right? I say, hey, these are like the 8 cards that I want to use to win. And then I build the rest of the deck around those. So yeah, I think that 8 is a correct number. 5 is too few because you have to have more card draw than the standard to get to them on average. 8 to 10. 8 to 10 is your sweet spot there. What is an archetype you don't feel comfortable on? My least comfortable archetype is probably control. And I think that once I put out the control episode, you'll realize that I can build it. I'm not comfortable playing it, and I think those are completely different things. A understanding of how something works is very different from the enjoyment of actually playing it. So I don't want, in general, to be playing a deck that I need to have full attention on the table because I want to have a good time with my friends. I want to socialize. Paying attention to the stack is a pain, especially in like your pre-competitive and competitive tiers, and that's why I don't play CEDH, is just because I don't want to keep track of the stack. I don't feel like that's what I go to Magic for. I do it to play fun games with my friends. So that being said, control is the archetype I don't feel comfortable playing. But that being said, like, I don't like counterspells because I think that they don't progress the game forward in any way. And you'll catch that as I go through my stuff. Like, I have a pretty strong bias that way. I'm very anti running Fierce Guardianship in your deck. I think that it is very close to just like cheating. Because as long as you have your commander out, you have a free counterspell. And that is a bias that I know that I have. And same thing with like Force of Will, Force of Negation. Saying no to somebody is like, for some reason, this is a big thing. And I've heard it discussed on multiple other channels, is that when you land a threat, even for just a full turn cycle, even if you don't get to swing with it, it feels better than it never hitting the battlefield, right? So I generally will run things like redirects than counterspells in general. Yeah, so that was, yeah. So I can go on about control for a long time. And it's telling me that my connection's a little bit unstable, so sorry about that. Yeah, I think I'll take one more question and then we'll close it off for the day. Anybody got anything? No? Well, I'll end off with this. What we are here to do when we play Commander, and people have to realize this, is to play a game with our friends, and we have to like care about those people to some degree, right? Their experience matters just as much as yours does, and I think that we can forget that pretty easily. As people, especially if we've had like that tough week, we can come to the table with a little bit less than pure intentions, and we just want to get a win in, and that's okay. That's understandable. Jam in a game, get it out of your system, but after that, just have fun with your friends. Like, that's what you're there for. These people care about you. They care about playing a game that you all love, and get in some good conversations when you're playing. So that's probably going to be where we leave off for this week. Thank you all so much for watching. The giveaways, I will get in contact with people and send those out as soon as possible. Again, the winners for this week, if you haven't caught it yet, are Lewis Idlet for YouTube and for Twitter, Strat Pap. Thank you guys all so much for your support. And yeah, I'll catch you soon.